And there we are. Thank you so much, Vixen Van Halen. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you so much for popping by to say hi. And thank you so much, Lay Shroom, for popping in to say hello as well. Hello, everyone. I thank you all so much for joining me today. So, today we shall continue our reading of different Irish myths and fairy tales. Now, please do let me know if there is any issue with the audio, and I will give y'all a bit of an update for tomorrow's event. Now, I was able to gather permission to stream a childhood's TV series on Twitch tomorrow at 5 p.m. CST. I see you, Shroom. Here you are. Loke off. But I am going to head and give that disclaimer that if Twitch decides to have issues, I'm not going to fight it at the time, probably. I'll probably just jump to Discord, invite everyone, and we'll continue watching it there. Now, I hope that will not be the case, as I will have not only permission, but also everything will be linked to the archivist's sites. But I just wanted to give you all that little update for tomorrow before we begin. Just so you're aware of kind of the idea that I have planned for it. Hello, Darla. Thank you for coming in. Oh, Flying Trolley. Thank you so much for the 5 months. Well, well, well. If this isn't an absolutely lovely sight to behold once more. Good evening. Well, thank you, Shroom. Flying Trolley. And poor Shroom, it seems as though as if Darla is here to torment you. I hope it's all in good fun for the both of you, though. But while I'm here, is everything sounding okay? Can you hear me? Can you hear the soothing rain? Is everything to your liking? Good fun, sure. Well, that is good. I am hearing quite fine, thank you. Well, that's all wonderful. Alright, without much further ado today, we shall continue our stories involving the Banshee and the Dullahan. Our next story, and our first one for today, is called Hanlon's Mill, attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. One fine summer's evening, Michael Noonan went over to Jack Bryan's, the shoemaker at Dallybuff, for a pair of brogues with which Jack was mending for him It was a pretty walk the way he took, but very lonesome, all along by the riverside, down under the oak wood, till he came to Hanlon's mill that used to be, but that has gone to ruin many a long year ago. Melancholy enough the walls of that same mill looked, the great old wheel, black with age, all covered over with moss and ferns, and the bushes all hanging down about it. There it stood, silent and motionless, and a sad contrast it was to its former busy clack, with the stream which once gave it use rippling idly by. Old Hanlon was a man that had great knowledge of all sorts. There was not an herb that grew in the field that he could not tell the name of it and its use. Out of a big book he had written, every word of it in real Irish character. He kept a school once, and could teach the Latin, which surely is a blessed tongue all over the wide world. And I hear tell as how the great Burke went to school to him. Master Edmund lived up at the old house there, which was then in the family, and it was the Nagels that got it afterward, but they sold it. But it was Michael Noonan's walk I was speaking of. It was fairly between lights. The day was clean gone, and the moon was not yet up, when Mick was walking smartly across the Inch. Well, he heard coming down out of the woods such blowing of horns and hollowing, and the cry of all the hounds in the world, and he thought they were coming for him, and the galloping of the horses, and the voice of the whisper in, and he shouting out, just like the fine old song, "Hello, Piper Lily August Finder," and the echo over from the gray rock across the river, giving back every word as plainly as it was spoken. But nothing could Mick see, and the shouting and the hollowing followed him every step of the way, till he got up to Jack Bryan's door, and he was certain, too. He heard the clack of old Hanlon's mill going through all the clatter. To be sure, he ran as fast as fear and his legs could carry him, and never once looked behind him, well knowing that the Dual Hollow hounds were out in quite another quarter that day, and that nothing good would come out of the noise of Hanlon's mill. Well, Michael Noonan got his brogues, and well heeled they were, and well pleased was he with them, who, when should be seated at Jack Bryan's before him, but a gossip of his, one Darby Hines, a mighty decent man, that had a horse and a car of his own, and that used to be traveling with it, hulking loads like the Royal Mail coach between Cork and Limerick, and when he was home, Darby was a near neighbor of Michael Noonan's. "Is it home you're going with the brogues this blessed night?" said Darby to him. "Where else would it be?" replied Mick. "But, by my word, 'tis not across the inch back I'm going again. After all I heard coming here, 'tis too no good that old Henlon's mill is busy again." "True for you," said Darby, "and maybe you'd take the horse and car home for me, Mick, by way of company, and 'tis along the road you go. I'm waiting here to see a sister's son of mine that I expect from Kilcolman." "The same I'll do," answered Mick, "with 1,000 welcomes." So Mick drove the car fair and easy, knowing that the poor beast had come off a long journey, and Mick, God reward him for it, was always tender-hearted and good to the dumb creatures. The night was a beautiful one. The moon was better than a quarter old, and Mick, looking up at her, could not help bestowing a blessing on her beautiful face, shining down so sweetly upon the gentle Albeg. He had now got out of the open road and had come to where the trees grew on each side of it. He proceeded for some space in the half and half light which the moon gave through to them. At one time, when a big old tree got between him and the moon, it was so dark that he could hardly see the horse's head. Then, as he passed on, the moonbeams would stream through the open boughs and variegate the road with clear of the plantation, variegate the road with lights and shades. Why am I getting so flustered at the way this is speaking of the moon? Mick was lying down in the car at his ease, having got clear of the plantation, and was watching the bright piece of the moon in a little pool at the roadside, when he saw it disappear all of a sudden, as if a great cloud came back over the sky. He turned round on his elbow to see if it was so, but how was Mick astonished at finding, close alongside of the car, with a great high black coach drawn by 6 black horses, with long black tails almost reaching down to the ground, and a coachman dressed in all black sitting up on the box. But what surprised Mick most was that he could see no sign of a head, either upon the coachman or the horses. It swept rapidly by him, and he could perceive the horses raising their feet as if they were in a fine, slinging trot, the coachman touching them up with his long whip, and the wheels spinning round like hotty-dotties. Still, he could hear no noise, only the regular step of his gossip Darby's horse, and the squeaking of the gudgeons of the car that were as good as lost entirely for want of a little grease. Poor Mick's heart almost died within him, but he said nothing, only looked on, and the black coach swept away, and was soon lost among some distant trees. Mick saw nothing more of it, or indeed of anything else. He got home just as the moon was going down behind Mount Hillary, took the tacking off the horse, turned the beast out in the field for the night, and got to his bed. Next morning, early, he was standing at the roadside, thinking of all that had happened the night before, when he saw Dan Madden, that was Mr. Rickson's huntsman, coming on the master's best horse down the hill, as hard as if he ever went at the tail of the hounds. Mick's mind instantly misgave him that not all was right. So he stood out in the very middle of the road and caught hold of Dan's bridle when he came up. Mick, dear, for the love of God, don't stop me, cried Dan. Why, what's the hurry? Said Mick. Oh, the master, he's off, he's off. He'll never cross a horse again till the day of judgment. Why, what would ail his honor? Said Mick. Sure it is no later than yesterday morning I was talking to him, and he was stout and hearty, and says to me, Mick, says he. Stout and hearty was he, answered Madden, and was he not out with me in the kennel last night, when I was feeding the dogs? And didn't he come out to the stable and give a ball to Peg Pullaway with his own hand, and tell me he'd ride the old general today? And sure, said Dan, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his coat. Who'd have thought that the first thing I'd see this morning was the mistress standing at my bedside, bidding me to get up and ride off like fire for Dr. Johnson, for the master had all got a fit, and poor Dan's grief choked his voice. Oh, Mick, if you have a heart in you, run over yourself, or send the gossoon for Kate Finnegan, the midwife. She's a cruel, skilful woman, and maybe she might save the master till I get the doctor. Dan struck his spurs into the hunter, and Michael Noonan flung off his newly mended brogues, and cut across the fields to Kate Finnegan's. But neither the doctor nor Caddy was of any avail, and the next night's moon saw Ballygiblin and more's the pity, a house of mourning. Interesting that they went for a midwife, when so often such women will be the scapegoats of when things go wrong. Our next story is actually a couple of stanzas, a few paragraphs of a poem. Oh, thank you, Gojira56, for following. I may sing this. And hello, Gojira. Hello. I may give this a little bit of a sing-song voice, but this couple of stanzas is called The Death Coach, attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. 'Tis moon night, how gloomy and dark. By Jupiter, there's not a star. 'Tis fearful, 'tis awful, and hark! What sound is that comes from afar? Still rolling and rumbling the sound makes nearer and nearer approach. Do I tremble, or is it the ground? Lord save us, what is it? A coach. A coach, but that coach has no head, and the horses are headless as it. Of the driver the same may be said, and the passengers inside who sit. See the wheels, how they fly over the stones, and whirl as the whip it goes crack. Their spokes are of dead men's thigh bones, and the pole is the spine of the back. The hammercloth, shabby display, is all pale, rather mildewed by damps, and to light this strange coach on its way, 2 hollow skulls hang up for lamps. From the gloom of Rathcooney churchyard they dash down the hill of Glenmire, past Lota, and gallop as hard as if horses were never to tire. With people thus headless 'tis fun to drive in such a furious career, since headlong their horses can't run, nor coachmen would be heady from beer. Very steep is the Tivoli lane, but uphill to them is as down, nor the charms of Woodhill can detain these Doolahans rushing to town. Could they feel as I've felt in a song, a spell that forbade them to part, they'd a lingering visit prolong, and after their head lose their heart. No matter 'tis past 12 o'clock, through the streets they sweep on like wind, and taking the road to Black Rock, Fork City is soon left behind. Should they hurry thus reckless along, to supper instead of to bed, the landlords will surely be wrong if he charge it at so much a head. Yet mine host may suppose them too poor to bring to his wealth an increase, as till now all who drove to his door possessed at least 1 crown apiece. Up the dead woman's hill they are rolled, Boreen a sight out of sight. Balin Temple they reach and behold, at its churchyard they stop and alight. "Who's there?" said a voice from the ground. "We've no room, for this place is quite full." "Oh, room must be speedily found, for we come from the parish of Skull." Though Murphys and Crowleys appear on headstones of deep-lettered pride, though Scannells and Murleys lie here, Fitzgeralds and Tomies beside, yet here for the night we lie down. Tomorrow we speed on the gale, for having no heads of our own, we seek the old head of Kinsale. It's always interesting when you come across similar stories from different areas of the world. I'm sure the Headless Horseman, a well-known American tale with, what is the gentleman's name? Ichabod. Now, maybe I could be mistaken. I know it as an American tale, but perhaps it's not. But it's interesting for a headless huntsman to be searching for a head. Although I have not so often heard of the horses themselves to be headless. Fitting. And then even with the corpses within the churchyard saying that there is not enough room, that is fitting as well, because early on in these stories we had multiple where a poor soul was forced to carry a body and try to bury it somewhere where there was room, only to be rejected for lack of space. Interesting, interesting. Hydration break. Our next story is called The Good Woman, once again attributed to T. Crofton Crocker. In a pleasant and not unpicturesque valley of the White Knight's country, at the foot of the Galtree Mountains, lived Larry Dodd and his wife Nancy. They rented a cabin and a few acres of land, which they cultivated with great care, and its crops rewarded their industry. They were independent and respected by their neighbors. They loved each other in a marriage, able sort of way, and few couples had altogether more the appearance of comfort about them. Larry was a hard-working and occasionally a hard-drinking, Dutch-built little man with a fiddle head and a round stern, a steady-going, straightforward fellow, barring when he carried too much whiskey, which, it must be confessed, might occasionally prevent his walking the chalked line with perfect philomatical accuracy. He had a moist, ruddy countenance, rather inclined to the expression of gravity, and particularly so in the morning, but taken altogether, he was generally looked upon as a marvelously proper person, notwithstanding he had, every day in the year, a sort of unholy dew upon his face, even in the coldest weather, which gave rise to a suspicion, amongst censorious persons of course, that Larry was apt to indulge in strong and frequent potations. However, all men of their talents have their faults. Indeed, who is without them? And as Larry, setting aside his domestic virtues and skill in farming, was decidedly the most distinguished breaker of horses for 40 miles around, he must be in some degree excused, considering the inducements of the stirrup cup and the fox hunting society in which he mixed. If he had also been a greatest drunkard in the country, but in truth this was not the case. Larry was a man of mixed habits, as well in his mode of life and his drink as in his costume. His dress accorded well with his character, a sort of half and half between farmer and horse jockey. He wore a blue coat of coarse cloth, with short skirts and a stand-up collar. His waistcoat was red, and his lower habiliments were made of leather, which in course of time had shrunk so much that they fitted like a second skin, and long use had absorbed their moisture to such a degree that they made a strange sort of crackling noise as he walked along. A hat covered with oilskin, a cutting whip, all worn and jagged at the end, a pair of second-hand, or to speak more correctly, second-footed, greasy top boots that seemed never to have imbibed a refreshing draught, of Warren's blacking of matchless luster, and one spur without a rowel completed the everyday dress of Larry Dodd. I personally cannot judge, as I very much wear out what other clothing I have, and I will mend them before I actually, eventually, toss them away. Make true full use of your items, I suppose. Thus equipped was Larry's returning from Cashel, mounted on a rough-coated and well-eyed nag, though notwithstanding these and a few other trifling blemishes, was a well-built animal, having just purchased the said nag, with a fancy that he could make his own money again at his bargain, and maybe earn a penny more by it at ensuing Kildorini fair. Well pleased with himself, he trotted far and easily along the road in the delicious and lingering twilight of a lovely June evening, thinking of nothing at all, only whistling and wondering what horses always be so low. If they go at this rate, said he to himself, for half nothing, and that paid in butter buyer's notes, who would be the fool to walk? This very thought indeed was passing in his mind, when his attention was roused by a woman pacing quickly by the side of his horse and hurrying on, as if endeavoring to reach her destination before the night closed in. Her figure, considering the long strides she took, appeared to be under the common size, rather of the dumpy order, but further, as to whether the damsel was young or old, fair or dark, pretty or ugly, Larry could form no precise notion, for her wearing a large cloak, the usual garb of the female Irish peasant, the hood of which was turned up and completely concealed every feature. Enveloped in this mass of dark and concealing drapery, the strange woman, without much exertion, contrived to keep up with Larry Dodd's steed for some time, when his master very civilly offered her a lift behind him, as far as he was going her way. Civility begets civility, they say. However, he received no answer, and thinking that the lady's silence proceeded only from bashfulness, like a man of true gallantry, not a word more was said, Larry, until he pulled up by the side of the gap, and then says he, "Ma Carleen Beg, my little girl, just jump up behind me without a word more, though never a one have you spoke, and I'll take you safe and sound through the lonesome bit of the road that is before us." She jumped at the offer, sure enough, and up with her on the back of the horse, as light as a feather. In an instant, there she was seated behind Larry, with her hand and arm bucked round his waist holding on. I hope you're comfortable there, my dear, said Larry, in his own good-humored way. There was no answer, and on they went, trot, 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 along the road, and all was still, so still and so quiet that you might have heard the sound of the hoofs on the limestone a mile off. For the matter there was nothing else to hear except the moaning of a distant stream that kept up a continued croon or a drowsing humming noise, like a nurse hushing. Larry, who had a keen ear, did not, however, require so profound a silence to detect the click of one of the shoes. "'Tis only a loose shoe is. 'Tis only loose the shoe is," said he to his companion, as they were entering on the lonesome bit of the road of which he had spoken before. Some old trees with huge trunks, all covered, and irregular branches festooned with ivy, grew over the dark pool of water, which had been formed as a drinking place for cattle, and in the distance was seen the majestic head of Galtymore. Here the horse, as if in grateful recognition, made a dead halt, and Larry, not knowing what vicious tricks his new purchase might have, and unwilling that through any odd chance the young woman would get spilt in the water, dismounted, thinking to lead the horse quietly by the pool. By the piper's luck, that always found what he wanted, said Larry, recollecting himself. "I've a nail in my pocket. 'Tis not the first time I've put on a shoe, and may be it won't be the last. For here is no want of paving stones to make hammers in plenty." No sooner was Larry off than off with a spring came the young woman just at his side. Her feet touched the ground without making the least noise in life, and away she bounded like an ill-mannered wench, as she was, without saying "by your leave," or no matter what else. She seemed to glide rather than run, not along the road, but across a field, up towards the ivy-covered old walls of Kilnaslattery Church, and a pretty church it was. "Not so fast, if you please, young woman, not so fast," cried Larry, calling after her, but away she ran, and Larry followed, his leathern garments, already described, crick-cracking at every step he took. "Where's my wages?" said Larry. "Thrompag Macalinog, give me a kiss, my young girl. For sure I've earned a kiss from your pair of pretty lips, and I'll have it too." But faster she went, faster, regardless of these and other flattering speeches from her pursuer. At last she came to the churchyard walls, and then over with her in an instant. Well, she's a mighty smart creature, anyhow. To be sure, how neat she steps upon her patterns. Did anyone ever see the like of that before? But I'll not be balked by any woman that ever wore a head, or any ditch either, exclaimed Larry, as with a desperate bound he vaulted, scrambled, and tumbled over the wall into the churchyard. Up he got from the elastic sod of a newly made grave in which Tade Leary the morning was buried. Rest his soul. And on went Larry, stumbling over headstones and footstones, over old graves and new graves, pieces of coffins, and the skulls and bones of dead men, the Lord save us, that were scattered about there as plenty as paving stones, floundering amidst great overgrown dock leaves and bramble that, with their long prickly arms, tangled round his limbs and held him back with their fearful grasp. Meantime, the merry wench in the cloak moved through all these obstructions as evenly and as gaily as if the churchyard, crowded up as it was with graves and gravestones, for the people come to be buried there from far and near, had been the floor of a dancing room. Round and round the walls of the old church she went. I'll just wait, said Larry, seeing this, and thinking it all nothing but a trick to frighten him. When she comes round again, if I don't take the kiss, I won't, that's all. And here she is. Larry Dodd sprung forth with open arms, and clasped in them a woman. It is true, but a woman without any lips to kiss, by reason of her having no head. Murder, he cried. Well, that accounts for her not speaking. Having uttered these words, Larry himself became dumb with fear and astonishment. His blood seemed to turn to ice, and a dizziness came over him, and staggering like a drunken man, he rolled against the broken window of the ruin, horrified at the conviction that he had actually held the Dullahan in his embrace. When he recovered to something like feeling of consciousness, he slowly opened his eyes, and then indeed a scene of wonder burst upon him. In the midst of the ruin stood an old wheel of torture, ornamented with heads like cork cowl, when the heads of Murty Sullivan and other gentlemen were struck upon it. Ah, hello, Game Crazy. You don't ever have to apologize for being late or early. Just the very act of you being here at all is more than enough to warm my heart. It was plainly visible in the strange light which spread itself around. It was fearful to behold, but Larry could not choose but look, for his limbs were powerless through the wonder and the fear. As useless as it was, he would have called for help, but his tongue was cleaved to the roof of his mouth, and not one word could he say. In short, there was Larry gazing through a shattered window of the old church, his with eyes bleared and almost starting from their sockets. His breast rested on the thickness of the wall, over which, on one side, his head and outstretched neck was projected, and on the other, although one toe touched the ground, it derived no support from thence. Terror, as it were, kept him balanced. Strange noises assailed his ears, until at last they tingled painfully to the sharp clatter of little bells, which kept up a continued dinging. Marrowless bones rattled and clacked, and the deep and solemn sound of a great bell came booming on the night wind. As a spectre rung the bell when it swung, swing, swang, and the chain it squeaked, and the pulley creaked, swing, swang, and with every roll of the deep death toll, ding dong, a hollow vault rang, as the clapper went bang, ding dong. It was strange music to dance by. Nevertheless, moving to it, round and round the wheel set with the skulls, were well-dressed ladies and gentlemen, and sailors and soldiers, and priests and publicans, and jockeys and ginnies, but all without their heads. Some poor skeletons, whose bleached bones were ill covered by moth-eaten palls, and who were not admitted into the ring, amused themselves by bowling their brainless noddles at one another, which seemed to enjoy the sport beyond measure. Larry did not know what to think. His brains were all amiss, and losing the balance which he so long maintained, he fell head foremost into the midst of the company of the Dullahan. "I'm done for and lost forever," roared Larry, with his heels turned towards the stars, and soused down he came. "Welcome, Larry Dodd, welcome," cried every head, bobbing up and down in the air. "A drink for Larry Dodd," shouted they, as with one voice that quivered like a shake on the bagpipes. No sooner said than done, for a player at heads, catching his own as it bowled at him, for fear of it going astray, jumped up, put the head, without another word, under his left arm, and with the right stretched out, presented a brimming cup to Larry, who, to show his manners, drank it off like a man. "'Tis capital stuff," he would have said, which surely it was, but he got no further than cap. Then, when decapitated was he, and his head began dancing over his shoulders like those of the rest of the party. Larry, however, was not the first man who lost his head through the temptation of looking at the bottom of a brimming cup. Nothing more did he remember clearly, for it seems body and head being parted is not a very favorable to thought, but a great hurry, scurry, with the noise of carriages and the cracking of whips. When his senses returned, his first act was to put up his hand to where his head formerly grew, and to his great joy there he found it still. He then shook it gently, but his head remained firm enough. And somewhat assured at this, he proceeded to open his eyes and look around him. It was broad daylight, and in the old church of Kilnaslattery he found himself lying, with that head, the loss of which he anticipated, quite resting for youth upon the lap of the earth. Could it have been an ugly dream? "Oh no," said Larry. "The dream could never have brought me here, stretched on the flat of my back, with that death's head and cross marrow bones ornamenting me on the fine old tombstone there that was faced by Pat Kearney of Kilcree. But where is the horse?" He got up slowly, every joint aching with pain from the bruises he had received, and went to the pool of water. But no horse was there. "'Tis home I must go," said Larry, with a rueful countenance. "But how will I face Nancy? What will I tell her about the horse and the 7 IOUs that he cost me? 'Tis them Doolahans that have made their own of him from me, the horse-stealing robbers of the world, that have no fear of the gallows. But what's gone is gone, that's a case clear." So saying, he turned his step homewards, and arrived at his cabin about noon, without encountering any further adventures. There he found Nancy, who, as he expected, looked as black as a thundercloud at him for being out all night. She listened to the marvelous relation which he gave with acclamations of astonishment, and when he concluded of grief at the loss of the horse that he had paid for like an honest man in IOUs, 3 of which she knew to be as good as gold. "But what took you up to the old church at all, out of the road, and at that time of the night, Larry?" inquired his wife. Larry looked like a criminal for whom there was no reprieve. He scratched his head for an excuse, but not one he could muster up, so he knew not what to say. "Oh, Larry, Larry," muttered Nancy, after waiting some time for his answer, her jealous fears during the pause rising like barm. "'Tis the very same way with you as with any other man. You are all alike for the matter. I've no pity for you, but confess the truth." Larry shuddered at the tempest which he perceived was about to break upon his devoted head. "Nancy," said he, "I do confess. It was a young woman without any head that—" His wife heard no more. "A woman I knew it was," cried she, "but a woman without a head, Larry." Well, it is long before Nancy Galgier ever thought it would come to that with her. That she would be left desolate and alone here by her beast of a husband, or a woman without a head. Oh, father, father, oh, mother, mother, it is well you are low today, that you don't see this affliction and disgrace to your daughter, that you reared decent and tender. Oh, Larry, you villain, you'll be the death of your lawful wife, going after such. Larry says, well, putting his hands in his coat pockets, least said is soonest mended. Of the young woman I know no more than I do of Moult Flanders, but this I know, that a woman without a head may as well be called a good woman, because she has no tongue. How his remark operated on the matrimonial dispute history does not inform us. It is, however, reported that the lady had the last word. My, what a terrible husband. The poor dear. Perhaps it would have been better that he was lost, and then she could at least think that he was murdered and not unfaithful. But with that, my dears, I do believe will be the end of our stories today. We're finally getting into the sections of the Dullahan. I wonder how many more stories we'll have before we continue on to our next section. Now, let me see if there is anyone I can raid. Nothing quite of a soothing manner. Well, I guess we'll call it here for today then, my dears. Thank you all so much for joining me today. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. And that truly means so much to me. So, without much further ado, I do hope to see you all tomorrow as I attempt to stream for y'all the childhood TV series that I got permission to stream. But if Twitch decides to give us problems, I'll very easily transfer it over to the Discord server, where we should be able to watch without much grief. But until then, my dears, thank you all so much for joining me. I do hope that you enjoyed your stay and that my glimmer will bring you back to me. But until then, stay safe out there. And please, keep your head. Thank you so much for watching till the end of the video. If you enjoyed what you saw here today, please feel free to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and if you wish, leave a comment down below. On each side of me, there should be other videos from my channel that you may or may not wish to look at. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining me.